Today we're delving into one of the most disturbing and harrowing mysteries: 7 horror stories involving people who disappeared while traveling. Prepare to hear chilling accounts of travelers who left home with certain destinations but never reached their destination, leaving only unanswered questions and desperate families. We'll explore real-life, suspenseful cases, showing how an ordinary trip can turn into an unsolved mystery, where each clue leads to more questions and the fear of the unknown takes over. So sit back, check if anyone knows your whereabouts, and let's begin this chilling journey. Oh, and before you disappear too, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and like it. This helps the channel a lot and ensures you don't miss any scary content like this.
Shall we? Erster The Late Night Driver.
The disappearance of Amanda Mitchell, which occurred in October 2022 on historic Route 66 between Amarillo and Oklahoma City, remains one of the most disturbing cases in the FBI's files. The 23-year-old, traveling from Los Angeles to New York after finishing college, became the protagonist of a nightmare that revealed a series of crimes that had terrorized the region for years. The story was reconstructed from audio recordings found on her cell phone, GPS records, and statements from investigators. Amanda had decided to take the road trip as a farewell adventure to college life. Her vehicle broke down near Amarillo, Texas, around 10 p.m., leaving her stranded in a deserted section of the famous highway. After hours of waiting for help without success, she accepted a ride from a truck driver who introduced himself as Dale Thompson, a middle-aged man with a friendly appearance and polite manner. Dale drove an impeccably clean and organized truck, with a spacious cabin decorated with photographs of American landscapes. Initially, Amanda felt relieved and safe. Dale was conversational, knowledgeable about the road, and shared interesting stories about his travels across the country. He offered water, snacks, and even a blanket when she mentioned being cold. During the first few hours of the drive, the conversation flowed naturally. Dale asked about Amanda's studies, her future plans, and her family. But gradually, Amanda began to realize that he knew specific details about missing persons cases on Route 66 that hadn't been widely reported in the media. When she mentioned hearing about a young woman who had gone missing months earlier, Dale provided precise information about the location, time, and circumstances that only someone involved would know. Tensions rose when Amanda noticed feminine personal items discreetly scattered throughout the cabin: a pearl earring on the dashboard, a bracelet dangling from the rearview mirror, a lipstick in the glove compartment. When she asked about the items, Dale casually explained that female passengers sometimes forget things, and that he liked to keep them as mementos of people he met on the road. As the night progressed, Dale began making disturbing comments about the women he had previously helped. He described their appearances, personalities, and personal histories in intimate detail that suggested prolonged contact. Amanda realized he wasn't just offering occasional rides, but systematically collecting information about his victims. The situation turned terrifying when Dale stopped at an isolated gas station and Amanda tried to use the restroom to call the police. She discovered her cell phone was out of service, but managed to activate the audio recording. When she returned to the truck, Dale had rearranged some items in the cab, revealing more female belongings: wallets, keys, photographs, and even ID cards belonging to various women. Dale noticed Amanda's growing nervousness and completely changed his demeanor. His voice became colder and more calculating. "You're very tense," he said, locking the truck doors. "Maybe you should relax like the others did." He revealed that he had developed a method for collecting young women traveling alone, offering assistance in times of vulnerability. Amanda realized she was trapped with a serial killer who used his profession as a truck driver to hunt victims along thousands of miles of American highways. Dale explained that he chose his victims carefully, young women traveling alone, without strong local connections that could quickly track their movements. During a forced stop due to a routine police checkpoint, Amanda managed to discreetly slip a note to an officer, alerting him to her situation. The authorities' swift action resulted in Dale's arrest and Amanda's rescue. The subsequent investigation revealed that Dale had been operating for over 5 years, responsible for the disappearance of at least 12 women along Route 66. In Dale's truck, macabre trophies from his victims were found: more than 50 personal items, photographs, diaries, and even audio recordings of his last conversations with the women. He had meticulously documented each crime, keeping detailed records of his victims in a hidden notebook. Dale confessed to developing a specific pattern: he would spot women in trouble on the road, offer assistance, gain their trust through long conversations, and then take them to secluded locations where he would eliminate them. He used his intimate knowledge of American roads to choose locations where the bodies would never be found. The investigation revealed that Dale had created a network of information, maintaining contact with other truck drivers and gas station employees who alerted him to women traveling alone. He also discreetly sabotaged vehicles in parking lots, forcing victims to accept his help. Dale was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Amanda survived but never fully recovered from the trauma. She became an advocate for better safety systems for women traveling alone and regularly participates in awareness campaigns. The incident led to significant changes in Route 66 safety protocols, including more emergency stations, improved communication systems, and increased police surveillance. This story, based on documented true events, serves as a sobering reminder of the dangers of accepting help from strangers and the importance of maintaining constant communication with family members during solo journeys.
2. To the rest stop.
In July 2018, the Lambert family, Mark, Elise, and their teenage daughter, Camille, decided to take a road trip across the French countryside, heading from Lyon toward the vineyards of the Loire Valley. On the third day of their trip, with the sun setting and the narrow road becoming increasingly deserted, Mark suggested they stop at a rest area that appeared on one of the signs along the D943 highway. The stop wasn't like the others. It looked old, dimly lit, with a small concrete building housing restrooms and an old vending machine. A single car was already parked there, a gray sedan with Belgian license plates. It was incredibly quiet. No crickets, no breeze through the trees, just the sound of the engine dying as Mark turned off the engine. Elise hesitated to leave, but Camille was already opening the door and stretching her legs. Across the room, a thin, middle-aged man in blue overalls and holding a flashlight was sweeping the floor around the bathroom. He watched them discreetly, unsmiling, and then resumed sweeping as if nothing had happened. Mark approached him to ask if it was safe to spend the night there. The man replied with a thick accent that it was safe, that he'd been the caretaker for years, and that many travelers had rested there without any problems. He said that at night the area was closed off with automatic gates for security. It sounded strange, but Mark didn't want to appear paranoid. The sky darkened completely. Inside the car, Camille slept with headphones on. Elise, restless, noticed that the Belgian sedan was still there, but there was no movement.
No lights on.
"I wonder if there are still people inside," she whispered. Mark replied that perhaps they were sleeping too. Around 2 a.m., a metallic noise woke them. It sounded like a gate being locked. Mark went out to check and saw the caretaker in the distance, near the entrance gate, fiddling with an electrical box. When he asked what he was doing, the man replied that it was just a routine procedure, but he avoided eye contact. Mark returned to his car, uneasy. That's when he noticed the Belgian sedan was gone.
No engine noise, no headlights.
He was sure he would have heard it if the car had started.
He felt uneasy.
He decided to check the small restroom structure. The door was ajar, and inside was a dim light. Entering, he found the air stuffy and humid. On the walls were marks scrawled in permanent marker, names, dates, license plate numbers. Some were scratched out. Others had symbols he didn't understand. At the back of the bathroom, a slightly ajar maintenance door leaked fluorescent light. As he approached, Mark heard quick footsteps behind him and turned abruptly. Nothing. Just the echo of his own racing heart. He returned to the car and locked all the doors. When he told Elise what he'd seen, she insisted they leave. That's when they realized the exit gate was closed, completely blocked by an iron bar that hadn't been there before. Mark tried to speed past it with the car, but it didn't budge. With no cell phone signal, they were stuck. For the next few hours, they watched the man in the coveralls circling between the cars, stopping for moments and staring inside, as if counting the occupants. Shortly after 4 a.m., a white van pulled into the rest area. It was eerily quiet.
3 young men got out.
The caretaker greeted them and then pointed to the Lamberts' car. The young men stared for a few seconds, then entered the restrooms. Mark, startled, started the engine and prepared for any movement. Nothing happened, until, less than 10 minutes later, the van drove off again. The young men were no longer with it. At dawn, another car finally arrived. An elderly woman and her poodle. Mark ran to her, frantic, and explained that they had been trapped there since the previous night.
She frowned.
"But, there's no gate here, sir," she said. Confused, they ran back to the entrance, and sure enough, there were no more bars, gates, or obstacles. The caretaker had disappeared. There was no sign of him, the van, or the Belgian sedan. Just the small concrete structure and the vending machine. The woman drove them to the next town, where they reported the incident to the police. But the officer, visibly skeptical, simply said, "This place doesn't even have a permanent caretaker. It's in a state of disrepair. No one should be looking after anything there." Camille, silent, held her cell phone. The day before, she had taken a photo of the stop sign. In the image, a reflection in the glass of the attendant's booth showed his face, but the reflection was different from the man they had seen. It was the face of another man. Someone with sunken eyes and a cold expression, much older. Almost cadaverous. The case was never thoroughly investigated. To this day, some swear the rest area at km 148 of the D943 no longer exists. but the name still appears on some travelers' GPS. And occasionally someone mentions, on obscure travel forums, that they've been there, and that they too felt someone watching them while they slept.
Dritter the cruise of the missing.
In June 2017, the cruise Aurelia Sunset sailed from Genoa on a 12-day Mediterranean voyage, with scheduled stops in Marseille, Palma de Mallorca, Barcelona, and Tangier. With a capacity for over 3,000 passengers, the ship was known for offering affordable luxury and an itinerary geared toward young adults and couples on vacation. On the fourth day of the trip, the morning after the stop in Barcelona, it was announced that a guest had gone missing. The official statement mentioned only an isolated incident and asked passengers not to be alarmed. However, for Isabelle Fournier, a 34-year-old French librarian traveling alone, it was the trigger for an obsession. Isabelle had a habit of discreetly observing passengers. She'd noticed, starting on the second day, that some guests no longer appeared after certain stops. Reviewing the photos she took at dinner on the second day, she noticed that a couple who had sat next to her had never been seen again. On the third day, a teenage girl chatting with the entertainers at the pool disappeared. And now, the supposed first disappeared. He discreetly sought out crew members to ask if it was common for passengers to disappear. The answers were evasive. Some avoided the conversation, others smiled nervously. Only a Filipino flight attendant named Leah let slip that this was the third case that week alone. From then on, Isabelle began noting the passengers' faces, creating patterns, and recording schedules. She realized the victims were all people traveling alone or with very few social networks. Young, discreet, and often without active social media. All of them had been last seen after dinner in the restaurant on Deck 7, a supposedly exclusive area, but one she had gained access to only by politely asking. It was then that she noticed something even stranger. Among the crew members was a man who never changed his uniform. He always wore the white security team uniform, even when off duty. Tall, always wearing sunglasses, and with a shaved head. He never spoke to the passengers, but he always appeared in the areas where the victim's last location was recorded. With some insistence, Isabelle got Leah to show her the ship's interior layout. There were technical corridors not accessible to guests, nothing unusual. But there was also a section called T5, connected to the lower hull, with no specific use. Leah commented that it was some kind of abandoned storage facility. Officially, it didn't exist. The night before the stopover in Tangier, Isabelle saw, from her own balcony, a small boat moving away from the ship. It was strange. No lifeboat should be used without reason, much less in the middle of the sea. Using a makeshift lens attached to her cell phone, she managed to enlarge the image and recognized the same man in sunglasses piloting the boat. By this point, Isabelle was convinced that something truly sinister was going on. She tried to report it to the cruise's security manager. She was greeted with formality, but that same day her access card was deactivated due to technical issues. Her dining records on Deck 7 disappeared from the system. And Leah, the stewardess, was nowhere to be seen, replaced by another who didn't know anyone by that name. On the morning of the penultimate stop, in Malta, Isabelle decided to act. She followed a group of employees moving cleaning carts into the technical corridors. She waited for the right moment and hid inside one of them. She was taken to a compartment near Sector T5. What she saw there left a lasting impression on her. The hallway was narrow, with reinforced doors and scraped-off signs. One of the rooms was ajar, with dim light coming from inside. Inside were files. Stacks of files with names, photos, and cabin numbers. Each folder had notes: alone, volunteer for activities, last seen at 10:40 p.m. Some were marked with a red X, others with a circle. Before he could flee, Isabelle heard footsteps. He hid inside a tool cabinet and held his breath. The man in sunglasses entered, talking to another crew member she didn't know. They were talking about dispatching one more today, and that the depth that coordinates Y47 was still safe. After they left, Isabelle rushed back to her room and spent hours trying to email the evidence. To no avail. The internet signal had been temporarily disabled. When they arrived in Genoa, she was one of the first to disembark, nearly jumping down the evacuation ladder. She filed complaints with local authorities and the Italian Navy. She was ignored. With no physical evidence, no clear images, no recordings of an identifiable voice, her testimony was archived. A few months later, Aurelia's Sun had its name changed and began operating on smaller routes in the Adriatic Sea. In the years that followed, similar reports continued to surface on travel forums. People noticed sudden disappearances. Crew members acted as if nothing had happened. And always the same kind of comment: it was a wonderful cruise. But something felt wrong, as if we were being singled out for something.
Hey everyone.
The stories of people who disappeared while traveling are hair-raising, aren't they? If you're enjoying these suspenseful and mysterious stories, take a quick break, subscribe to the channel, and leave a like. This really helps the channel grow and motivates me to keep bringing you more hair-raising content. Now, let's get back to the next stories. There's still a lot of mystery ahead.
4. The ghost train station.
In the summer of 2019, 5 backpackers decided to cross Eastern Europe by train. They were 3 boys, Daniel, Hugo, and Lucas, and 2 girls, Eva and Nura. They had met on travel forums and met in person in Prague, heading together to Vienna, Budapest, and finally to the Romanian countryside, drawn by little explored trails and landscapes forgotten by mass tourism. That night, they expected to board the last train to the city of Sighisoara. The station they were staying at, called Sirenini, was small, with just 2 tracks and a simple, nearly abandoned brick building. Most of the staff had already left by the time they arrived, except for an elderly man wearing an old railway company uniform who introduced himself as Gheorghe, the station master. Gheorghe welcomed them kindly, but with a stern tone. He said the train had been delayed indefinitely due to a landslide and wouldn't arrive that night. The 5, already tired and without internet access to look for a plan B, accepted the old man's suggestion: sleep in the station grounds until the next morning. He led them to a back room equipped with a few sleeping mats, a small stove, and an old kettle. He assured them it would be safe, that the area was peaceful, and that he would lock the entrance himself as a precaution. At first, the group took it all as an adventure. They laughed it off, improvised a dinner with snacks from their backpacks, and tried to distract themselves with games and conversation. But there was something unsettling about the place. No trains had passed through the entire night, not even freight trains. The tracks were overgrown with weeds in some sections. And through the window, they saw old Gheorghe pacing the platform repeatedly, even after midnight, as if waiting for something or someone. Shortly after 2 in the morning, Eva noticed Nura was no longer in the room. Everyone thought she'd gone to the bathroom, but after 10-20 minutes, they began to worry. They went looking for her at the station. They called her name. Nothing. The bathroom was empty. Her backpack, untouched, was still in the corner of the room. Gheorghe showed up when they were already desperate. He said he hadn't seen her leave and suggested she might have gone exploring on her own. The explanation didn't make sense. No one would go out alone in the dark, in the middle of a forest, with no signal, in an unfamiliar area. Daniel wanted to call the police, but Gheorghe said there had been no signal for many years, and that the nearest police station was 40 kilometers away, with no direct road. Fearful, the group decided not to sleep any longer. At dawn, they demanded to leave and go to the nearest town to report their disappearance. Gheorghe hesitated, then opened the side gate and pointed to a trail in the forest. He said it was the only way out, as the trails were blocked for maintenance. The 4 followed the trail for hours, until they found a dirt road and finally, a truck driver who took them to a village. There, they explained what had happened. But when they mentioned Sirenini, the villagers exchanged uncomfortable looks. One of them, an older one, whispered, "That station was closed over 15 years ago. No one has operated there since 2004. Shocked, the backpackers persisted. They described the building, the name on the facade, Old Gheorghe. One of the residents reluctantly dug out an old album and showed them a photo. It was the same man, Gheorghe Pavel, station master until 2003, who had disappeared along with 3 tourists who had taken shelter there during a storm. The police were called. When officers arrived at the scene, the station was empty. There were no mattresses, no kettle, or any sign of recent occupancy.
No names on the walls, no sign of Nora.
Just an old filing cabinet in the front office, with names handwritten in careful calligraphy.
Some crossed out.
Others highlighted in red. Among them, Nura V. July 2019. The investigation didn't go far. The station was no longer listed in operational records. The name Sirenini had been removed from the national train system. Satellite images showed the structure still existed, but no trains ran there. It was as if it had been gradually erased, leaving only traces for anyone who dared stop there. Daniel, Hugo, Lucas, and Eva returned to their countries scarred by what they saw. They tried to reach out to newspapers, social media, and travel forums.
Few paid attention.
Some suggested they had been drugged, tricked, or that it was all just a fabricated story. But since then, similar reports have emerged of backpackers getting lost on rural Romanian roads and swearing they slept in a train station that no longer exists. And in an obscure 2022 post on an abandoned trails forum, an anonymous user posted a blurry photo of a platform surrounded by weeds, with a figure in the background wearing an old railway uniform.
The post's title reads,
Sirenini is still waiting for those who are lost.
5. The Tourist Guide.
In November 2016, a group of 6 European tourists decided to embark on a day trip to the Phang Nga caves in southern Thailand. They included 2 couples, Sophie and David from France and Martina and Jonas from Sweden, as well as 2 backpackers who had met at a hostel in Phuket, Leo a German and Matteo an Italian. The plan was simple: to escape the conventional route, explore little-known natural formations, and experience something off the beaten path. At the hostel, a staff member recommended a local guide known only as Chanarong. According to her, he was experienced, spoke English, and offered exclusive tours to areas not open to the general public. Although he had no online presence or registered company, the group was excited by the idea of something more authentic, and hired him that same day. The next morning, Chanarong showed up with a battered van and caving gear. He was a thin man with few smiles, scars on his arms, and eyes that seemed to carefully assess each member of the group. He led them to a mountainous region off the tourist trail, crossing dirt roads and entering an abandoned village. He said in broken English that the caves there were older and purer. For the first 2 hours, the trail was breathtaking: magnificent rock formations, narrow passages lit by lanterns, and sparkling stalactites. The group took photos, laughed, and continued in high spirits. But after the third hour, the mood began to change. Chanarong deviated from the planned route, saying he had a new tunnel to show. The entrance was a narrow hole in the side of a rocky wall, partially covered by dry leaves. The passage required crawling for a few meters. On the other side was a dark room with a strong damp smell and no sign that anyone had been there before.
Tere, so meeting set of Sophie's alarm.
She asked to check the location on her cell phone, but there was no signal. Matteo also tried, without success. That's when they realized the guide had removed the batteries from one of the flashlights, claiming it was better to conserve energy. Jonas began to get irritated, saying he wanted to go back. Chanarong just looked at him and replied curtly, "It's not safe to go back alone." The group tried to remain calm, but the tension grew. At each fork in the road, Chanarong chose his path without explaining why. Markings on the walls, common on cave trails, were absent here. It was as if they were entering an unknown underground network, one known only to him. It was David who noticed first. On the floor, next to a wall, was a torn backpack. Inside were a thermos, a damaged camera, and a scarf with a Norwegian flag.
The group froze. No one commented.
They just looked at Chanarong. He stared at them and said, "Many tourists leave things behind." Tensions flared when Leo refused to continue. He said he would return the same way and wait at the entrance. Chanarong grabbed him tightly by the arm.
A confrontation began.
The group split, some trying to appease, others urging calm. Finally, Leo broke free and ran off down the dark trail alone.
Chanarong just vetchet in sie längse.
Then he turned and said, "Those who don't listen are lost." They continued for over an hour. Fatigue, claustrophobia, and fear began to overwhelm the group. The water in their bottles ran out, and the oxygen inside seemed heavier. Then they reached a wider area, where they found the remains of sleeping bags, food packaging, and a wallet containing documents belonging to a Canadian tourist who had disappeared months earlier, according to reports Matteo vaguely remembered. Sophie began to cry. Jonas demanded that Chanarong explain what was happening. The guide simply smiled for the first time. Tourists want to see what no one else sees.
I'll show them.
At that moment, Jonas lunged at him. The fight was quick and intense. In the dark, with a flickering flashlight, Martina hit the guide with a rock, knocking him unconscious. Unsure how long they had, the group rummaged through their pockets and found a small hand-drawn map with red markings, trails, arrows, and what appeared to be drop-off points. With no time to argue, they decided to follow the map back to the entrance. The trail was confusing, and without the guide's guidance, every sound in the darkness felt like a threat.
The flashlight feilet twisse.
The air seemed increasingly thin. After nearly 3 hours of crawling, stumbling, and sweating, they found natural light.
The sun was setting.
Leo was outside, covered in scratches, dehydrated but alive. He'd managed to climb part of the slope and exit the cave through another point. He tried to call for help, but no one knew there were people there. They went to the local police. They reported everything. They returned with the officers the next morning. But the tunnel entrance was gone. The vegetation had been rearranged.
No clear trail. No sign of Chanarong.
In the nearest village, no one knew him by name, but some chuckled quietly when they heard the story. "This guide changes his name every season," said one man. Some return from the caves, others, no one sees anymore. Years later, similar stories surfaced on travel forums. People who hired local guides to explore off-the-beaten-path caves had eerily similar experiences: hand-drawn maps, disappearances, unmarked tunnels, and the constant feeling they were being taken away, never to leave.
6. Rot in.
In September 2021, a Brazilian couple, Lucas and Mariana, decided to explore Argentina's Mendoza wine region by car. It was the kind of trip they'd always dreamed of: vineyards, Andean landscapes, rustic inns in the middle of nowhere. But on the fifth day, the weather changed drastically. A sudden storm formed, and on the way back to San Juan, they were forced to leave the main road. Their GPS signal was dead. No chance of continuing their journey. It was then that they spotted a worn wooden sign, swaying in the wind, Hospedage del Sur, 2 kilometers. The only option in the middle of a bleak nothingness. The inn was small, made of stone and dark wood, with old windows and thick curtains that barely let in any light. A generator was humming loudly in the back. At the reception, a rural-looking man with suntanned skin and a strong accent greeted them with dry friendliness. He said the power always went out when it rained, but they were used to it. "You're lucky to have found this place," he said, smiling. "Here, the world stops." The atmosphere was heavy, but the couple was too tired to be demanding. They paid cash, the machine didn't work, and were shown to a room on the upper floor. The hallway was long and quiet, with only 2 other doors occupied. There was a sweet scent in the air, like wilted flowers mixed with cheap cleaning product. Dinner was served in a common room. A meat stew, rustic bread, and house wine. Lucas found the flavor strange, somewhat metallic. Mariana barely ate. 2 other couples were also dining. One was Argentinian, the other appeared to be German. No one said much. The Argentinian couple seemed restless, exchanging quick glances as if waiting for something. The innkeeper watched from afar, sitting in a dark armchair next to the unlit fireplace. After dinner, the couple felt a sudden tiredness, as if something was draining them. They staggered upstairs to their room, their vision blurred and their muscles heavy. Lucas even commented, "That wine was strange, wasn't it?" But Mariana was already lying down, her eyes heavy. Half an hour later, he too passed out. Around 3 a.m., Lucas woke to the sound of an engine. Through the window, he saw a black, unmarked van pull discreetly up behind the inn.
2 men got out.
One of them lit a cigarette and pulled a large plastic bag from the back of the vehicle. Lucas watched in absolute silence, feeling panic rise like a fever. In another bag, something moved. He tried to wake Mariana, but she slept soundly, as if in a trance. Her eyes moved beneath her lids, but she didn't respond to calls or desperate shaking. Her cell phone had no signal. And now it was dead, even though it had been left at 70% charge before bed. The charger was also missing. Lucas walked down the hallway with light steps. The doors to the other rooms were ajar. In one of them, clothes and backpacks were strewn about, but there was no sign of anyone inside. The Argentine couple had also disappeared. In the kitchen, in the dim light of an emergency lamp, he saw the innkeeper talking to a man in a military cap. On the table were documents, passports, and a folder with photos. He recognized Mariana's face, photocopied on a file with medical information and personal details. At the bottom, a note, "Healthy, young, high-performance profile." Lucas nearly fell backward. He ran back to his room. He locked the door. He tried to wake Mariana again, but she was sweating, her lips dry, her eyes half closed. There was no time. He used the headboard to block the entrance. He spent the entire night on alert, a kitchen knife in his hands. At dawn, he heard horns honking outside.
It was the police.
2 cars and a small truck. Lucas didn't understand right away. But minutes later, someone knocked on the door.
"Police. Are you okay?"
The Argentine couple had managed to escape through their bedroom's bathroom window and walked for nearly 2 hours until they found a small gas station. There, they reported what they had seen. The patrol arrived at the inn early in the morning. In the back, they found a hidden room with padded walls, security cameras, and portable bars. In the basement, they found forged documents, cell phone chips, syringes, and lists of buyers. Everything was organized in folders with photos of travelers. The innkeeper was arrested, along with 2 accomplices. They claimed they were merely selling information, but the investigation uncovered a larger network, human traffickers operating on the border between Argentina, Bolivia, and Paraguay. Selected tourists were isolated, often without official reservations or digital check-ins. They were sedated and taken in vans overnight to exchange points. The case was hushed up by the media. Some local newspapers briefly reported it as arrest for kidnapping in illegal lodging. No mention of human trafficking. A few months later, the place appeared on Google Maps as temporarily closed. Today, there's no official record of the inn. But in closed travel groups, the story is told as a warning. And on obscure forums, drone photos of a ruined place on the side of Route 40 still circulate. A place where the world truly stops, and sometimes people too. 7. The Midnight Bus. In January 2020, in northern Mexico, a bus line called Sol del Norte offered overnight trips between small towns and the capital. The buses were old but inexpensive. For many workers and students, it was the only option for long distances. One of the most popular routes was the 11:45 p.m. route, which left Ciudad Valles for Mexico City. It became known among locals as the Midnight Truck. That night, among the passengers were Carolina, a nursing student visiting relatives, Mateo, a Spanish backpacker traveling across the country, 2 women returning from a pilgrimage, a man in a suit and a simple backpack, and about 10 other passengers. The driver, silent, tall, and with a stern expression, checked the tickets without speaking. He locked the door tightly before setting off. For the first hour, everything seemed normal. Some people were sleeping, others were listening to music. The air conditioning made an annoying but constant hum. The road was dark and deserted. Mateo tried to strike up a conversation with Carolina, but she was wearing headphones. That's when the bus suddenly slowed down. They stopped in the middle of nowhere, a narrow road surrounded by tall grass.
No gas station, no streetlights.
One of the passengers was called by name.
He hesitated, but got out.
2 figures waited outside. One of them opened the back door of a dark van.
The passenger got in.
The bus continued on its way without a word. Some thought it was strange, but didn't question it. It was late, and they were tired. But half an hour later, another stop. Another name was called.
This time, a woman.
She also hesitated, looking around as if she didn't understand. The driver stared at her coldly and repeated the name. The passengers began to exchange glances.
She got off.
Carolina muttered something to herself. Mateo heard, "This is wrong." She tried to ask the driver what was going on, but was ignored. The man in the suit sitting in the back row approached and whispered to Mateo,
"Be quiet.
You don't want to be next." The next stop was even more tense. Carolina's name was called.
She froze. She said she wouldn't get off.
The driver turned to face her. The bus's headlights illuminated only the brush and a dirt road off to the side.
Another van stopped.
This time, 3 men were waiting outside.
"Mississippi. It's you."
"Get out now," the motorcyclist said, harshly. Carolina began to cry. Some passengers protested. The man in the suit remained silent. When an older gentleman tried to stand up and defend the girl, one of the passengers in the back pulled out a handgun and calmly pointed it toward the aisle.
"Have a seat. This isn't personal.
Just follow the instructions." Carolina was taken away by force.
The bus door closed. Silence.
The armed man returned to the back and crossed his arms. No one else dared speak. Mateo, trembling, pretended to sleep. But he memorized everything, the faces, the clothes, the lines. They passed for over an hour without stopping. Some passengers tried to hide their panic. Others seemed to accept it, as if it were inevitable.
At 4 a.m., another stop.
The driver got off the bus and spoke to someone on the radio. The road looked the same, but something had changed. The sky was beginning to lighten. The man in the suit seized the moment and discreetly stood up. Mateo saw him drop a crumpled piece of paper near the trash can. A few minutes later, the bus pulled onto a side road and came to a complete stop. The driver turned off the engine and got out without explanation. The armed man disappeared into the trees.
20 minutes passed.
Then a police car appeared. The bus door was opened by a uniformed officer. Confused and drowsy, the passengers began to disembark. There was no driver, no sign of the armed man. Only the empty seats of those who had gotten off at previous stops. The officer urged calm and wrote down names. Mateo was the only one to tell everything: the stops, the names called, the gun, the disappearances. The police said they would investigate. But the report filed only stated, "Forced stop due to mechanical problem." In the following days, Mateo tried to contact newspapers, NGOs, and missing persons groups.
He was ignored. He posted on travel forums.
Someone responded, "I also traveled with that line. I saw something similar. I was one of the few who stayed until the end." Others began sharing similar stories. People remembered strange stops. People who fell asleep and never woke up. Travel companions who just weren't there anymore the next day. Sol del Norte ceased operations 3 months later, citing financial difficulties due to the pandemic. But independent investigations by activists revealed that the company lacked complete passenger records, nor precise GPS routing for several overnight trips. The name of the driver that night was never confirmed. Mateo never forgot the faces of those who disappeared. And he still keeps the paper left by the man in the suit, with a handwritten number and a sentence in crooked letters.
If they choose you, don't fight. Survive. And tell.
And so we come to the end of our 7 horror stories involving people who disappeared while traveling. So, which one scared you the most? Will any make you think twice about traveling alone or telling someone about your travel plans? Tell us in the comments which one was your favorite. If you enjoyed this dive into the darker side of travel disappearances, don't forget to leave a like. This really helps the channel grow and encourages me to bring you more chilling stories. And if you're not a subscriber yet, subscribe now and activate the bell.